everyone. We're having a few technical challenges on my end. So in the event we go out, you guys carry on without me. But tonight's going to be a really special Pearl of Wisdom. I'm excited about it. It's our 76th Pearl of Wisdom. And tonight is about sacrifice. And I am very excited to hear about these 7, she calls it sacrosanct. I don't even know what that word is. I've never used it before, but basically it means value. And she's going to give us a little bit more information about the 7 S's. And that's what those S's she's referring to are. Sacrosanct. I'm not saying it right. Maybe it's my Southern accent, but she will explain more. These sacrifices that we have that stimulate, they have a stimulating sacred support. So, wow, who would have thought about sacrifice in that way? So tonight you're going to learn about these 7 S's and how they impact your journey of sacrifice. And I've always thought of sacrifice as a negative, but they're going to, if we understand them, they're going to help to skyrocket us to unleash our gifts and bring our desires and dreams into fruition. How exciting is that? So get ready for another wonderful Pearl of Wisdom tonight as we move forward. We've got a full house here tonight. Thank you all for joining. It's always amazing to have you. We also are on Facebook Live, as you know. And yeah, it will be time to unveil the 76th Pearl of Wisdom sacrifice in just a few minutes. I can't wait to learn this new perspective. Mynoo always shares this unique vantage point with us where we can look at something from the other side, which does make it always so unique. So this new perspective on sacrifice is going to be about how you can view sacrifice to transform forever your way of looking at this. It will empower you with this magical and miraculous lightness of being. So we can look at sacrifice in a different way. So again, thank you all for joining. If for some reason I disappear or I get really in slow motion, there is a little challenge that I'm having with my internet tonight. So thank you for bearing with us. Excited to have you all here. Our 76th Pearl of Wisdom sacrifice. And we're going to get these 7 S's from Mynoo, which again, Mynoo, this word that means valuable that I have such a hard time pronouncing, I call it sacrosanct, but maybe you can give us a little more information on that. Thanks again, everyone, and over to you.
Thank you very much. I am just going to mute everyone. And yes, let's begin. Okay. Yes, so the 76th Pearl of Wisdom. The 7 S's, sacrosanct in sacrifice. Sacrosanct basically means too important, too special to be changed. And it was interesting because, you know, my relationship to this whole sacrifice piece was like as if being a martyr and, you know, feeling depleted. I sort of like thought it akin to compromising in some form and feeling depleted, or finding, you know, that you do some of it and then you do it again and do it again. And after a while, it starts to build up and you feel taken advantage of. You know, those were like sort of the associations that I had with sacrifice. So when sacrifice showed up as one of the pearls of wisdom, you know, it was like a pearl of wisdom is like if you only ever worked with one pearl of wisdom, you literally can create a world as a world that works for everyone. So I thought, my God, you know, how can this be a pearl of wisdom? Everybody going around sacrificing, you know, in this deluded perception that I had about this, the energy of sacrifice. And lo and behold, the description, the summary description of what we are talking about in the context of sacrifice are the 7 S's that are sacrosanct in sacrifice. Sacrosanct being too important or too special to be changed. And as I talk about it, you will see that just by these different perceptions that those of us who have a rebel in us go about thinking about sacrifice, we are changing it left, right, and center. And as a result, the foundational innate power that is sacrosanct within sacrifice is being, compromised. So this one was a surprise one, right? So it's not something that I have worked with in any of my previous stories that I share about. This one, the work that I did on this one was really done with benefit of hindsight only, where I looked at different situations from my own life, because it was such a surprise at what was coming through that it took many, many little incidents to really bring to life each of the S's that are sacrosanct within sacrifice. I have to share that as I started working with it, every S that I worked with, it's as if it opened up my cells more than they already were. And I already feel I'm at a stage where there is tremendous level of openness in me. But it's as if a different form of flow became available to me. In Ayurveda, they talk about that we have 62,000, they call them nadi channels through which energy moves in our field. It includes our physical body and all the different layers that encompass our higher self as well. And these 62,000 nadi channels, all of them terminate in the mouth. And there are several termination points at the base of our feet. So it was interesting that as I was working through each of the S's, I felt a flow, which is different than the flow that I already experienced before. And I can see why we are talking about this. We are actually about to start another pipeline in September. So on 9/11, we begin another pipeline. It continues all the way until the 28th of September. And this is all in the context of this year, which is all about rejoicing. And I would not have correlated rejoicing with sacrifice in my previous interpretation of sacrifice. And lo and behold, it is one of the most beautiful things, as long as you remember the 7 S's that are sacrosanct in sacrifice. Too important, too special to be changed. So there is a zero tolerance. If you're engaging in sacrifice, and it is beautiful to engage in, as long as you work with the 7 S's, then just stay sacrosanct with each of the S's in their complete purity. So let's begin with the first one. The first one is sincere. Where sacrifice loses the plot, in my mind, is when it feels like a have to thing. I have to sacrifice myself. That's where the sincerity goes away. And it becomes as if something that I'm doing as an obligation. But if I look at where have I had this S of sacrifice really play out in a sacrosanct way, where it was done purely, nothing changed. And I would say in the time of that sincere, in its complete pure sense that I experienced, where I genuinely felt and believed wholeheartedly in what I was doing. And yes, it was actually taking me away from stuff that I might have pursued at that time was when I first realized that I was pregnant. And I very sincerely made changes to my life. I with this complete sincerity, truly believing in this new phase of life that I was entering. And that this phase of life was going to be different. And I was willing to very sincerely sacrifice whatever it took, knowing that what I was doing was really wholehearted and genuine. I mean, I wasn't in a particular phase in my life where I could not just only be a mother. The expectant mother phase was actually tougher than once I became a mother. At that point, I believe all of the 7 S's were very, very prevalent. And yet they were being implemented in this sacrosanct way. I did not call myself sacrificing anything because I did have not a very healthy relationship to the word itself. Though from time to time, there were things that it was very clear I was sacrificing. One of the first things I did, just so that I continued to feel worthy as I was going through it, was a difficult pregnancy in the sense that I just was nauseous for 9 months. It didn't go away after the first 3 months. Something that I hated feeling nauseous generally, and then to have 9 months of it was not very pleasant. So the moment I got pregnant, what I did was I registered myself for a management MBA, thinking, I can't imagine just sitting at home, for 6 months or so, not doing anything. So I didn't feel like I was sacrificing in that negative connotation. I registered as into the management MBA. But here's the thing, because I was actually going through and implementing these 7 S's in this sacrosanct way, I actually did progress very healthily with my management MBA during my pregnancy. Yes, I paused it for a period of time once the baby was born. And it didn't feel like I was sacrificing anything. It didn't feel that way. I heard other people say, wow, you're really sacrificing. Here's the other thing that I saw that happened, which is normally if people said that, I would have corrected them because I didn't like the vibration of sacrifice. And yet, in the context of that scenario, because there was complete sincerity, I just didn't feel I needed to respond to anything. I just smiled. So as I'm doing this, preparing for a Pearl of Wisdom, looking at the 7 S's that are sacrosanct in a sacrifice, I was surprised to find that where I was implementing the 7 S's, even though I was doing it without knowing this, that I'm sharing with you, they remained sacrosanct. It was no fuss whatsoever. I didn't feel like I was sacrificing anything in the connotation that I had about sacrifice. I also saw within myself and others that sometimes when we engage with sacrifice, we also sometimes adopt a holier than thou attitude. And here, when you're implementing the 7 S's in this sacrosanct way, there is no holier than thou. it just is. There's an isness about it. And it's just the vibration of sacrifice. The innate vibration, remember I talk about every word has an innate vibration. The innate vibration of the word sacrifice is stupendous sincerity. Until this Pearl of Wisdom, I didn't even engage with the innate vibration. It's when I looked at, okay, the seven S's that are sacrosanct within sacrifice, too important or too special to be changed. Oh, of course, sincere, stupendous sincerity. Of course, that's the innate vibe of a sacrifice. Where I found it within myself, where the seven S's were being implemented, was certainly my access point was the time that I became pregnant, and then the birth of the baby, and then bringing him up, and the different milestones that took place in his life and my life. That's how I began. I found access to where the seven S's were playing out exactly as I'm sharing with you here. I also realized that, in my business incarnation, and it continues to this day, I have a particular gift of converting ideas into business and then having them scale. And every time that happened, my relationship to an idea that I was gestating to make into a real business or bring it into reality, I was in exactly that same relationship as I was in birthing my first child. So as a result, the seven S's of sacrifice were playing out exactly in this sacrosanct way. And that was that secret sauce that existed. I experienced unequivocal success, 100%. Converting an idea into a business, converting an idea into and bringing it into reality. Not all of them succeeded once that was done. And that's where, sacrifice in its negative connotation came in. But that process of idea into reality was completely sacrosanct. The seven S's were absolutely implemented exactly as I'm here sharing with you. The first one being sincere, really going through that in a wholehearted way with genuine belief. To such an extent that I have a very specific formula that I share with people when they have got an idea, they want to make it real. There are several steps, and you follow those steps, it will happen with anybody and everyone. That came from me implementing these seven S's. Let's look at the second S. The second S is stupendous. Of course, it is stupendous. The innate vibration of sacrifice is stupendous sincerity. Stupendous, amazing, great. There's a greatness to it. It's tremendous. It's extraordinary. And if I was to now map this, which I did, right? I'm saying if I was, but I actually did, because this was so contrary, even in this state of my life, because I had such a different relationship to sacrifice, that I did this in several scenarios with benefit of hindsight. So I literally took the time of becoming pregnant and going through the pregnancy and birthing my child. And I looked at stupendous. Well, there's part of me, it was a planned pregnancy. So it was something that, in terms of time in my life, we were ready for it. It's as if I've realized I developed some new powers or something, you know? Before I got pregnant, I was so busy work-wise. Then I get pregnant, I could take on the management MBA, which made me even more busy, plus the pregnancy, plus everything else that needed to be done work-wise. And I had the domestic violence conflict that was actually becoming worse at home. And despite all of that, because I was engaged in, I didn't call it sacrifice, but I was engaged in the 7 S's that are sacrosanct within sacrifice, I felt like I was growing, you know, I was growing in size, but I was also growing mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. My social dynamics became such that it's as if something within me just quietened down. Because I realized that if I am to accomplish everything within 7 months of carrying this baby, because that's when I would go on maternity leave, I had to really only focus my attention on that which only I could do. Many of the practices that I talk about, you know, choose the that 2% that will create 100% impact. I developed those skills at that time. And it was stupendous to see what was possible. I mean, it made me realize, as I was looking at this with benefit of hindsight, that how much of my time would simply be wasted in not being present. When I'm in a conversation, I'd be thinking, what is it that I'm going to react or respond with? By being present, I didn't need to react. Sometimes I didn't need to say anything, but I was able to really pick out that 1 or 2%, but that is all that I had the capacity to implement myself. And therefore, it had to be something that was actually going to shift the needle. I became a masterful needle shifter. And that felt stupendous. I was actually working for quite a large local council in London at the time, in their IT department. And during my pregnancy, I got promoted 2 times over just because I was so effective. It was stupendous. It literally connected me to my own greatness in a very humble sort of way. And this whole piece about that sincere wholeheartedness kept me humble, kept me grounded, enabled me to celebrate. It was also a time where I hired a whole new team of people who were going to continue with a couple of very large software development projects that we were engaged in. And I don't know where I got that idea from, because that was the time where, you know, there's a lot of refugees that were coming from Iran into England. The Shah of Iran was ousted and all of that was going on. And I just decided to go to these refugee centers and find technology specialists to take on. And the only job we could give them was that of an intern. But these were highly experienced people. Iran was very advanced when it came to software development in those times. EDS had a very big operation there in Iran. And I knew that there were some good project managers, and I needed some good project managers. And I got them in those refugee centers. And that was stupendous in itself to even think about that would occur. They were all like little things that I saw were talked about in terms of my leadership after I came back and I saw some of the inductions that were happening of new teams joining the IT department. It was amazing because I had a very strong software development director from a fairly substantial operation in Iran who became a part of my team as an intern. And I mean, intern was just because that was the system by which we could employ him. But he was my right-hand person. And he was so grateful. His American wife was there also. She was also grateful. The whole family was so grateful that he was actually playing to his strengths. So my baby and I received so many blessings. That's why I think I was able to do the management MBA in the run-up to the birth of my baby. I was able to achieve so much there because these guys were part of my team. But that came from the presence that you get by being sacrosanct with these S's. I wasn't the sort of person who would think about how much better can it get, but it says I did get into celebration. And it was this guy who shared with me, so I asked him that, is there anything that you feel you would have done differently in your professional career? And he said, I would have celebrated more with my team because everything changed overnight. We never thought, we felt we were invincible. And overnight we were running, having left everything behind. So then we started celebrating. And that made the pregnancy, despite the vomiting and all of that, it made it sort of enjoyable. And the stupendous S, I was noticing it playing out every day, multiple times a day. And despite the experience of unpredictability of what would occur when I get home, and sure enough, my husband, now ex-husband, was becoming more and more violently aggressive for some reason, I still felt my life was extraordinary. The third S. I mean, seriously, with this pearl of wisdom, my command of English language is becoming so good. I think it's becoming so for everyone. The third one is sanguine. It was like it is interesting, I was someone who loved going into work. It was always, thank God it's Monday type experience I had for myself, and my team members also would be very excited about coming into work. We didn't have as much connectivity in terms of mobile phones and stuff in those days. Thank God for that. I think we would be working all the time otherwise. But we would all be super excited about coming into work. And so there was that eagerness, that enthusiasm, that optimism, and that positivity that was there. I mean, I'm sure it was such a blessing for my son, Sai, to have his mother in this space, despite everything that was going on at home. And I sincerely believe, because I had this S playing out, this idea of going to a refugee center and recruiting the most qualified people occurred. It was so left of field of an idea. Even when I went to the refugee center, they got me to fill up these, very to me, they were a little bit of pathetic forms, and so I filled them up in the way the form constricted me to write about what I was looking for. But I insisted that what I wanted to do was to interview people And from that emerged, and it truly felt the sanguine S implemented in a sacrosanct way. You can't imagine what it was like. I mean, you can actually envision just going there and somebody who is so qualified and so experienced speaking to someone, like I was probably 10, 12 years younger than him, and seeing the genuine, sincere excitement from me to discover the capabilities that he had, and enthusiastically welcoming him to be a part of our team. You can imagine what it did for him. You can imagine what it did for others that were there, feeling that they'd left everything behind and there was no hope. The optimism was phenomenal. And that was the sanguine part of the S. If I look at this whole time, going through pregnancy, and I remember it was like 16 weeks or something, and I'm still like vomiting away. And it didn't even limit itself to the morning. It was like there throughout the day. And I'm attending these big meetings and town hall meetings because we were making a policy shift, and a whole new computer system was being introduced. And I was the main software development director who was taking that forward. Like I would go to these meetings, even my, the person who was the head of my division and the CFO, who was really the ultimate chief officer responsible for the IT department, they would be cringing at going into the town hall meetings because they knew there were the various unions were up in arms about this. But I was in this sanguine state, eager, optimistic, positive, totally sincere, and pregnant. So I definitely got my airtime. The pregnancy gave me the airtime. And I was able to talk about what we were doing in the vibe of the 7 S's of sacrifice. We actually set a whole new standard, which then got implemented across all of local government offices in the UK, just because we chose to go ahead and implement the system in the way that we were proposing. My director thought that I was learning all of these things in my MBA program, and that's what I was implementing. It wasn't actually, because it was really just the start of the MBA program. It really was the 7 S's. When I look back, it was the 7 S's playing out. My presence was off the charts. Everyone felt heard because I wasn't there reacting. This is the place that trained me on attack is the best form of defense. And I wasn't attacking. I was actually receiving, which is different than how the rest of the people had ever taken it, policy issues through. I wasn't attacking. So as a result, before I went on maternity leave, the new person, the Iranian intern, came in, and he was anchored in as a project leader. And everybody respected him. They were excited to be led by him whilst I was going to be away. I had loads of parties at home, actually, after I broke off for maternity leave and after the baby was born as well, despite the baby's birth, because they were literally in this sanguine state, eager and positive and optimistic and wanting to share what had happened. in a celebratory way. We had anchored the vibe of celebration before I actually broke off for maternity leave. It's quite, and I'm sharing this stuff from my life, you know. What I invite each one of you to, as you're listening to, you can listen to it and okay, it's an entertaining and interesting story. But actually, you know, as you implement these 7 S's or the 7 anything of the Pearl of Wisdom, just take your life. It is so rich. You are your best teacher, truly. We just never look at our life in this nuanced way, in this holistic way. Can you imagine I'm just talking about these 7 S's and relating it just to the time that I was going through my own gestation period? You know, the baby isn't born yet. And there's so much there is that I learned from it that I'm able to share with you. And there's nothing unusual about what I'm talking about. It's just that my perspective with which I have looked at it has given me so many learnings all of these years later. My son is 33 years old now. So as I share, you know, my sincere desire is that you station yourself in the richness that is yours, that you have experienced by living your life. You may or may not have done it consciously, but you have lived your life, otherwise you wouldn't be here. So just take what I'm sharing and apply it to those moments from your life. What you will find when it comes to sacrifice and the 7 S's implemented in a sacrosanct way, there are certain incidents, situations where you will find all of the 7 being implemented. And that's where the complete richness of sacrifice in its innate vibration of stupendous sincerity plays out. Those of you who have pets, you know, you'll see what occurred there. You'll find several of these S's playing out exactly as I'm talking about. And you will see the impact they had. The game with the pearls of wisdom really is to bring that remembrance back. If you've done it once and you've reawakened that remembrance, you know you can keep doing it again and again. You don't have to go back through a very big process. So when I do the Pearl of Wisdom, my invitation to you is, you know, before the next week, take this, you know, and implement it. You just have to have even 5 minutes a day as a dedicated segment where you implement these 7, whatever it is that we have discussed in the Pearl of Wisdom, and just go through and apply it to your own life. Get that remembrance back. All of us, regardless of status, personal economic condition, health condition, whatever it may be, whether you speak English or you don't speak English, but here I'm talking in English, so all of you can certainly work with that. You can all experience every one of these. We've all had certain moments, even if it is only one, where the 7 S's of sacrifice have played out in a sacrosanct way. The 4th S is sacred. It truly felt that I was blessed to be carrying this baby. There is so much, so many blessings that I continued to share for myself for probably the first time ever, that I was even focusing on myself. It was a sacred experience. carrying this baby. It was a sacred experience, finding someone who was so accomplished and giving them that another chance. And totally, respecting them for what they had achieved, as opposed to feeling holier than thou because I have given you this opportunity. I felt blessed. That how lucky was I to find exactly the right person to hold the reins while I was away. This is where I started counting my blessings. I started counting my blessings that I went to the right refugee center. I could have gone anywhere and might not have found this person. I didn't know which one to go to. I just went to the one that was the closest to my workplace, where, because it was a town hall, I wanted to go somewhere where I could actually go and talk to the authorities. So I went to a local one, which happened to be near Heathrow, the airport, which happened to have many of these professionally qualified people. It was literally, it felt like the blessings I got from him, his family, his children, and his close contacts and my own team, because he would come into work like really looking forward, eager. All of these S's were playing out for him also. It was like a sacred experience. To me, sacred is really presencing divinity, a godliness. Something that is so pure and sanctified. And it felt that way. And I know for sure there were so many political factors that were playing out because of the kind of system that we were implementing. From the media dealing with false stories in the media to the opposition parties blowing up little problems out of proportion. We had to deal with all of those. It felt like we were on a sacred mission of some kind. And it truly felt like waters were parting. Every time we would say, okay, this is where we are intending to get to. These are the blocks that we are dealing with. He was phenomenal at coming up with, solutions to blocks, because after all, the build up to them finally leaving Iran had to be quite ingenious to deal with various issues that would have come up. Even the journey of leaving the country and keeping the whole family intact created a whole host of experiences that he was bringing in to bear. We felt, as a team, very blessed. It was a multicultural team, a multi-racial team, a religious team as well. And none of that really was there other than just the sacredness, pulling each one of us into the best version of ourselves. And the project was sanctified every step of the way. We have finally had the union leaders really driving this thing forward, taking on the political shenanigans, so we didn't have to get pulled into that. The fifth S. The fifth S that is sacrosanct within sacrifice is synergy. Synchronicity, yes, I knew that. But synergy, I remember writing quite an interesting essay on synergy in my management MBA program from what I was noticing playing out within my team. Synergy produces extra energy that propels success, which occurs when two or more people or two or more institutions come together. We actually did not do any specific work on identifying what our synergies were. It occurred because of the environment we created, and I believe it occurred because we were engaged in this journey of sacrifice with the 7 S's being implemented in a sacrosanct way. And the synergies were playing out. Synergies were playing out for me personally too. As before, it would be quite a big job, okay, I have to go to a doctor's visit, and I wasn't feeling up to driving the cars. How was that going to be organized? It was all like a really big thing, and it wasn't. Somebody or the other at work completely knew when my various appointments were. I didn't even need to remember them. They'd organized for me to be taken there and for it to be taken care of. It was literally pretty cool that we would be there in a project management meeting. It was a time where I would have stand-up meetings, and I needed to go vomit. I'll go vomit and come back, and no big fuss. We would just carry on. I think it was when I did this work with the benefit of hindsight, I realized such joy, truly, an environment where sacrifice is being implemented with these 7 S's in a sacrosanct way. It's a Jago environment. Joy, ease, grace, omnipresent. A synergistic team actually evolves. We can get very theoretical about it, and it's okay, be theoretical. But really, it is all about implementation. It is with this benefit of hindsight that I saw that power of implementation and this focus on implementation that really landed for me. Planning is all well and good, and it's great. But it's working the plan. That's what prevents results from happening. And there is a meticulousness with which that plan is worked without being heavy about it. That is what becomes available to you when you implement the 7 S's. That ability of being completely present cuts out the clutter, removes confusion, and synergy starts to roll like a bandwagon. Our team, as it became synergistic within the department itself, that is what actually multiplied. So the union leaders also came in. And they were literally in the wake of our own synergy, which is why they also became synergistic in supporting us to implement what we had taken on and played their part. We didn't need to say, you do this or you do that. It was as if we were protected and we were allowed to do the work that we needed to do. Everybody knew that I was going to be, off on maternity leave by a certain point, and they were synergistically making sure that the milestones that required to be done before I left were done. Initially, there was a lot of questioning. How can an intern be the stand-in for you when you leave? I'm so grateful I took him on very early on in my pregnancy. So that by the time I was in the 5th month, it was very clear that he was exactly the right choice. And it was that extra energy, that extra power that this team got that really enabled the success to take place of this particular project, and brought in more elements, more resources, exactly that were required at the time that were required. And a very beautiful teamwork ensued. The 6th S. The 6th S, that is sacrosanct within sacrifice, is self-assertive. So I remember, I never thought of it as sacrifice, but I would hear people say, oh, now you have a baby, there's a lot of sacrifice is going to be needed at work. And in other situations where people would sort of talk about sacrifice, where the 7 S's were playing out, my self-assertion wasn't defending myself. It really was about expressing where I was and what I was experiencing. There was no defense that was necessary. There was no reaction that was necessary. I actually became, and like, as if I was engulfed by this genius curiosity about people having a point of view, really getting curious about where is this point of view coming from? I actually became very interested, as opposed to the way I used to be, which is really push forth my point of view. But by the time I'm at the 7S, the 6th S of self-assertive, I was just sincerely interested. And actually what that did was it added to the richness of the environment we live in. There are so many teachers we have. It contributed massively, by the way, for the MBA program that I was on, because I was going from being a software developer to actually learning about all these different aspects of business whilst bringing up a newly born baby. But by being able to operate in this self-assertive way, it gave me a sort of self-assurance. And I was able to express myself, ask the questions that were really relevant to me, because I had that window when I was doing my MBA, I was segmenting my time in that very focused way. And I was always looking for that 2%, which is now it is 0.01%, sometimes 0.001% to have 100% impact. But I did get down from 20% to 2% at that time. And I'm sure adopting the 7 S's in a sacrosanct way of sacrifice is what enabled me. The self-assertive was such a gift. For the first time, I felt I was actually expressing what I wanted to see happen. I was doing it confidently. I was doing it sometimes even forcefully, but not aggressively. I understood the difference between assertion versus aggression. And I was starting to now create my own leadership style, which I now describe as inspired leadership. All began with, you're pregnant now. It's a lot to be sacrificed. And sure enough, I see this 7 S's playing out exactly as I'm sharing with you. So it was very powerfully empowering. And there's a depth to it. I don't know where you're at energetically, but it's like it really lands quite deeply. The sacrifice has such a deep, very pure vibration. As long as you implement the 7 S's in a sacrosanct way, too important to change or modify. Implement them exactly. You're powered up by sacrifice. The seventh S is solace. Yeah, it's about, comforting when you're sad. But it's also about just a knowingness that you are supported, that allows you to remain clear. And it's okay to feel sadness from time to time. Acknowledging that you support yourself and you further accentuate your own clarity of thought. This was a very important factor. I didn't realize it until I did this exercise in the context of sacrifice that I was about to share with you all. We would go into different situations that this project leader had experienced. And sure, there was adventure, and then there was great sadness also. By allowing all of us as team members to actually engage with this story meant that he didn't have to put on this bravado. He was able to, from time to time, experience a bit of sadness because there were people that were left behind, He was here and he would feel sad from time to time. He would even feel guilt from time to time that, wow, isn't how lucky he is to have been found, and there he was, building his life with such a strong foundation. And there were others who never got that opportunity. And it was an important part to acknowledge and not brush it aside. Otherwise, that burden, that heaviness would be brought into what was being created. It actually created an environment of support, and it actually created an environment where our team valued clarity of thought. And if that clarity of thought was missing, then the synergy piece played out, and we supported each other to find what was it that was a sadness or guilt or whatever that needed to be acknowledged. We weren't doing the tool of acknowledgement because I didn't know it as a tool at the time, but that is what was actually occurring. So the 7 S's that are sacrosanct in sacrifice. And that is what makes sacrifice a pearl of wisdom. Sacrosanct means too important or too special to be changed. You stay with these 7 S's. You stay with them as the S's that are going to be sacrosanct. And if they are, then sacrifice powers you with stupendous sincerity. So the 7 S's, as a recap, are sincere, stupendous, sanguine, sacred, synergy, self-assertive, solace. Those are the 7. Listen to this pearl of wisdom again and again, because it really did, because my thinking was so screwed up about sacrifice that I really had to work through this. Over to you, Catherine.
Thank you so much, Mynoo. That was really remarkable. And it does give me a completely different perspective on sacrifice, as I'm sure you all have had as well. There goes all my notes, all 12 pages on the floor, but I will be looking at those and doing my homework this week. It's just amazing. And I love the expanded vocabulary. So all of us will have so much fun, really getting down and dirty with this and really enjoying it, looking in hindsight and remembering what these 7 S's can do in our life. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Mynoo, for another beautiful Pearl of Wisdom. And we will see you right here next Thursday for our next Pearl of Wisdom. Do your homework. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Namaste.